Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Yellow Room. Today, we have a very special guest. She's actually one of my great friends. Her name is Patty Barham. She is a recent blogger. She just started a blog website, and it is simply amazing. I've been reading through some of her all of her blogs, but one that stuck out to me tremendously was her one on surviving loss. So I'll go ahead and let Patty introduce herself, kind of tell you, what led her to creating a blog in the first place, and then we'll get on to discuss surviving loss. So Patty, here you are.
Well, hello everyone. Like she said, my name is Patty. And what really drove me to starting my blog was I was doing a bit of self-reflecting, and I felt like I wasn't doing anything to help others. And during this time, I was thinking, well, what do I really have that I could use to help other people? And sometimes I think that we don't realize that we learn a lot through the hard lessons that we go through. So I decided to open up and share my experiences and things that I've learned that have helped me to grow and get through life.
Amen. I think that, when we are transparent with ourselves and with others, we unlock a lot of things for ourselves and others, because a lot of times you could very well be going through hard times in life and you'll never know or be able to connect yourself with people who have gone through those hard times or who are currently going through them if you aren't vocal, and you share your experiences. So I'm so glad that, you took that first step and you went ahead and sought after everything that you wanted. So kudos to you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So we can go ahead and talk about your latest blog, Surviving Loss. So what was kind of like before we go ahead and give an overview of the blog itself, what was kind of like your mental space? What was going on in your life that kind of motivated you to write this blog?
So actually, one of my good friends, from back home in Richmond, she had just lost her grandmother. And her grandmother was like a second mom to her. She was the only child for several years growing up, so her grandmother was like her mom. And I knew that in the past few years in my life personally, I had lost two aunts, and my mom was also diagnosed with the disease. And it was a really hard time for me. And I knew that when you're going through loss like that, there's really nothing you can really do to take that pain away from someone. But I just thought maybe if I could just write out my thoughts, write out to her the things that I learned and the things that have stuck with me to help me get by, maybe it would help her. And actually during that time, my grandmother as well was in the hospital, and 4 days later after posting the blog, she passed away.
Wow.
So it was kind of perfect timing in a sense, and I kind of ended up needing to hear my own words.
Wow. So, I've expressed my condolences to you before, but again, my deepest condolences to you. I definitely have been there. I know, how it feels, how you could still be very well feeling, but I'm glad that you were able to reflect on your own words, and I'm praying and I'm hoping that your words gave you peace, the peace that you've been able to give others from your blog.
Thank you very much. Some of the things that I really took away from this time, I guess the key points from the blog Surviving Loss was, one is the accepting process. And I feel like I'm kind of going through that right now, where it's very important to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Stop trying to hold it in. Stop trying to pretend that you don't want to cry, let it out. If we weren't meant to be able to cry, God wouldn't have given us the ability to shed tears. Just really being able to process that this person is no longer here, or you no longer have this job, or this friend is no longer a part of your life. It's hard. I think that's the of the longest phase of the grieving process, I would say.
Right. So, a few years ago, my mom actually passed away, and it wasn't a sudden death. It was, she was terminally ill. And so I really think now that you've said what you had to say about acceptance, I think because there's definitely different stages of grieving. No two processes are identical, so you can't necessarily compare someone else's grieving process with your own. But I think that my acceptance stage was like very prolonged because, again, she was terminally ill. So it's kind of like, all right, the doctors are saying she has this much time to live, even though I know for a fact they don't have the final say. But it's kind of like, okay, we know it's going to happen. We just don't know when. And I think that was like it was really hard to see someone that you love, the woman that gave me life, to endure this. And it's like in the back of my mind, I knew that she was struggling. It's like she opened up and told us that she pretty much cried herself to sleep every night because she didn't know if she was going to wake up. So it's like, what would you say to someone who is maybe watching a loved one or themselves are, looking forward to their own death? Like, how do you accept that? Or what do you think? I don't know. I don't know.
Like you said, it's definitely not the same for everybody. But I feel like you have to find your thing. One of my aunts that passed away from cancer, like your mom. And one, I just want to say, you did a phenomenal job to me from, of how you grieved. Mm-hmm. The way you were able to push through. But I just tried to hold on to a hope. Mm-hmm. That at the end of the day, everything God does is for a purpose. And even though it's so hard to accept, I have to have some type of hope that it has to get better.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think, I'll be honest, my faith was tested all types of ways around my mom's death. Like, I questioned God over and over and over again. I'm like, if you're so great, if you're almighty, you're all powerful, you're all doing, why can't you just, heal her? How can you allow, such a beautiful person to be destroyed by an ugly disease? And honestly, when my prayers weren't answered and she passed away, I was just like, you know what? Me and God, we beefing. Like, I'm not praying to you. Like, it was just crazy. And I actually did not pray for like almost a year. Like, I turned my back on him. I couldn't come to terms with it. But then it's like, I thought about it in hindsight. I'm like, my mom was ready to go. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times, especially when people are battling like terminal diseases, they get to a point where they make up in their mind, I'm ready to go, especially if they're at peace with God. I feel like once your loved one says that they're ready to go, and I had to tell myself that, like, at that point, they're probably suffering. They're in so much pain. It's just hard for them. So I kept telling myself, this is watching her die. This is even after. If my prayers were answered and she stayed, she's suffering. She's not living. So, I came to terms with, okay, it's her time. And now I wouldn't say that I wouldn't have my moments, but I just get joy in knowing that she's better off than I am. And if anything, she's closer with me than ever before. So that's where I find my peace.
It's definitely a difficult process. And I do agree, especially with what you said about the suffering. It is so hard watching that. It is so hard that I think sometimes you get to the point, kind of like you said, where you don't want them to suffer anymore. Mm-hmm. You want them to, but you just don't want that suffering. And when you do have that peace with God and they've made their peace with God, it's a little bit of a ease to know that, girl, they're in heaven living it up with the good Lord Jesus.
Right, absolutely.
And one thing that my mom shared with me when I was having a difficult time accepting is she's like, oftentimes everyone, every Christian, I mean, we have to be perfectly honest, we've all questioned God. We've all hit a low point of, God, I don't understand why is this happening? Why are children being molested and raped and, these things happening to children and good people who stick to themselves and aren't doing anything to anybody? And one of the things she reminded me of was, so there's a scripture that talks about that where God is saying, for my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. That there's a greater plan. And she gave me a description of a quilt. And, she's like, you see these grand quilts with these beautiful designs and they turn out so pretty. But when you turn it over and you look at all the stitching, there's crisscrosses, it goes underneath, sideways, and you would never think that at the end, when you flip it over, it makes such a beautiful picture.
Wow.
So I try to focus on the quilt and how it ends. And even though I'm at a position where right now I honestly feel like I'm on the back side of the quilt with the stitching, I know that it's going to be complete and it's going to be beautiful.
Right. That's the word. That analogy, I gotta write that down.
It's just something about, moms and older people, they had them saying, girl.
Right. That is a word. Now, even outside of people who are experiencing, the loss of a loved one, because believe it or not, I mean, I have some friends who, they've asked me, like, well, how did you deal with losing your mom and all of this? Because they have never experienced the loss of a close loved one. I mean, death is inevitable to us all. One day they will. But what about for the people like, who are having a hard time with accepting a long-term relationship, or the loss of a job, or the loss of, friendships that they thought were going to be forever?
One day at a time, honestly. Relationships are hard too, especially when you've been with someone for years. I mean, if you've lived together and you woke up next to this person every day, or the first person you text in the morning, you FaceTime, they really became your best friend, you feel like you lose a piece of yourself a little bit. And my advice would honestly be rediscover who you are. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in having another person attached to us that we don't realize that we are whole on our own.
Wow. Yeah. Sometimes you lose yourself in the midst of trying to be everything else to someone else. We could go on to discussing, being happy again. So once a person had accepted some type of traumatic, season, circumstance in their life, what's their journey to happiness? Like how can they look forward again? How can they go after their happy place after enduring such a dark season of their life?
I think it is perfectly okay to fall down. It's like a child learning to walk. They fall down so many times, but you have to get up. And it might not be both feet at a time. It might be you get on one knee, then you get up on the other knee, and then you get on one foot, and then you get on the other foot, and just make a step. But I think every person, regardless if you're going through a loss or not, you have to find what makes you happy and what refreshes your soul and your spirit. And for me, especially I would say high school through college, I love to be around people all the time. Like, you would not catch me by myself. You would not catch me sitting in silence by myself. I just did not like it. So when I got to a point where I lost a good friend, they didn't pass away, but we just, kind of broke ties. In college, it was like, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Like, this person I eat with, I go to class with, I study with, like, what am I supposed to do? And I challenged myself to sit in silence for a whole weekend. No music, no TV, just sit in silence and try to figure out what makes me happy. So I tried a lot of things. I've tried different styles of music. I've been getting into Afro beats now. I've tried cooking. Is cooking your thing? Do you really like to get in the kitchen and put your big toe in it and make delicious food? Do you like writing, expressing yourself? Sometimes getting your emotions out on paper can, I mean, be a relief to you. It feels like you took off like 10 pounds. Are you a person that likes to exercise? Do you like being outside, getting fresh wind? And honestly, for me, what I've learned is I really enjoy nature. Like, bugs are not my thing, you know. I still have a fear of, wasps, bees, the hornets, the yellow jacks, anything that can sting or bite. But something about being outside in the sun and fresh air and just being in what God created with his hands, it just rejuvenates me. But I think everyone has to find, what is that thing? Is it drawing? Is it spoken word? But I would challenge them to find a thing that renews your spirit.
Right. Wow. I know for me, like, I get joy, like pure joy, when I'm able to serve others. So, I always tell people my life goal is to inspire people. Like, that's my greatest aspiration. So I could be having a sucky day, like the worst day ever, but I speak words of encouragement into other people and I see their reaction, it just does something to my soul. So that's like, I think like positive energy is definitely contagious. So like that's my thing. Because what we make happen for others, God makes happen for us. So if that's my whole thing, it's like if I can go into my workplace, or I can go into the grocery store, wherever, and I can make someone else's day, I can be the light in someone's darkness, God will too send me a light in my darkness. And I just think it's like a domino effect. But I definitely agree with you. I couldn't agree with you anymore. And the whole thing about, not being afraid to fall. I always tell people, if you fall into the floor, and I mean you're at your lowest point, you're in the perfect position for prayer. Like, that's when you get on your face and you talk to God. Like, not your friends, not your loved ones, like you and God. You're in the perfect position to do it. And he'll get you up.
I felt it. All of it. You're already there.
All right. And then the last thing. So I have talked to a lot of people. I just like talking to people. And some people, after I like talking to people about how they deal with certain things, specifically, traumatic experiences. But I like talking to people too who have gone through some things in life. So I know a few people who, have been addicted to drugs, people who've been, victims of sexual slavery, and a lot of times I ask them, I like to pick their brains, like, well, what happened? What do you feel like happened to get you in that position, or, these destructive coping habits? And a lot of times it resorts back to some type of loss, whether it was a divorce, whether it was a bad breakup, whether it was a death, whether it was the loss of a job. Some people just fall victim to very destructive coping mechanisms. What would you, and I know that you touched on this in your blog, but what would you tell people? You've already said, find what it is that you love and do it. But how do people avoid, falling victim to destructive coping habits?
I would say you need a strong support system. Having people around you who will be protective of you. Having good friends and good family is very important. Because where you fall down, they can help pick you back up. Because it is so easy, and I can speak from personal experience, to want to grab anything that would just make you feel good, even if you know the high is only going to last so long, if you know the sexual encounter is only going to be for so long. You just want something to numb the pain. But and it's hard, because even when my grandma passed, my first thought was, I need a drink. I need something strong. I just want to sit in a corner somewhere by myself and just pour it up But one, I know that that's not what my loved one would want.
Mm-hmm.
Would they want me to spiral, down? Try to think of what they would want.
Right.
Would they want you to, they wouldn't want you to do that. They know that you would be sad, but they wouldn't want you to sit in that sadness. And I would challenge the person to live for them. I feel like loss teaches you, especially death specifically, how precious life is.
Absolutely.
And how short life is. And that you should do everything that you really want to do. Find your purpose, but don't sit and allow temporary things like drugs or pleasures hold you captive, because you are more than that and you can do more than that.
Wow. I couldn't agree with you more. Because I think that those temporary pleasures are going to have long-term and sometimes permanent effects, so I definitely think that a good support system is essential. Like, I know how it is, like, you lose someone, you go through a bad breakup or whatever, and your first resort is isolation. But that's not the answer, because the devil is happy when he gets you by yourself. Like you said, you need some strong friends and some strong family members in your corner. Like, you need some faith feeders, because if the devil can get you alone, he can do a lot of things in a quick amount of time. So it's very important that you surround yourself with people. I know that it may not necessarily be the easiest thing to do. For me, I had an issue with people. I don't know, it just made me feel weird. Like, I knew deep down inside that people had great intentions and their motives were good. But every time someone would say, how are you doing since your mom passed? I'm like, yo, why are you mentioning that? Like, I was having a good day. You just reminded me, like, you could have just saved your words. But now I'm just like, okay, I understand. But that in itself made me not want to be around people, because I just felt like people were going to constantly be reminding me of what happened, when that really true. I mean, they meant well by it, but that's just how I was taking it. I didn't like the constant phone calls, the text messages, because it's like, wow, I'm having a good day. I haven't cried today, but here you are reminding me of it.
Yes. I think that I absolutely agree. I think I understand people mean well, but it's like someone punching you in a wound almost.
Right.
And yes, it is important for those people who are close to you to ask you if you're really okay. But one thing that really helped me, that I absolutely want to thank you for, was this past weekend and attending the conference, your first speaking engagement.
Wow.
Last weekend was my first weekend after coming back from North Carolina for my grandma's funeral. And I honestly was going to get a hotel room and just, for the weekend, and just be by myself. And just being around powerful women who were speaking about things that they've gone through and how they got through, and hearing you speak, and being around you and the great group of girls who were around, and eating and laughing and joking. I had an amazing weekend, and I feel so recharged.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. That's what friends are for, man. That's exactly what friends are for. You should never feel dead on the inside around people who's supposed to have your back. Like, your winning circle should make you feel so vibrant and alive. All of that. Like, and anyone that's listening, if your friends don't make you feel that way, then you need to reevaluate your circle. Granted, I know that every day won't be peaches and creams. Like, every friendship, relationship, whatever, any type of relationship you have with a human being, it's not going to be perfect, but the good should outweigh the bad. Like, you should not have people sucking the life out of you. You need to have people that are constantly pouring life into you, and those people, those very people, will make surviving loss a smoother transition for you. Not saying that it's going to be, any easier, but it should be a smoother ride. And if you are crying, if you have that heartbreak or breakdown in the middle of the night, or meltdown midday, those are the people who you should be able to call, text, say, hey, like, I'm having a moment. Can you console me? Like those should be the type of people that you have in your life.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm so glad that you spoke on this because that's actually what my next blog is going to be about, is friendship.
Okay. Well, let them know how they can keep up with you on social media and catch up with your blog so that they can get real-time notifications of your great blogging.
Okay, so to read my blog, you can go to epiphanyblog.com. And I have a few blogs on there. You can also find me on Instagram at lovable_essence_. And you can also find me on Facebook by my name, Patty Barham.
All right. Well, did you have anything else? Any last takeaways you wanted to say before we end it?
So I think the last thing that I wanted to say is you just take your time. This grieving process of losing a friend, a loved one, a job. It doesn't take a week, doesn't take a month. Don't compare how long it took somebody else to you. Take your time.
Amen. I back you up with that one. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. I hope that you are truly inspired and you've gotten some great takeaways to deal with whatever it is that you're currently dealing with. And again, we can't stress enough the importance of support. Like, you need supportive friends, you need supportive family members, and beware. Not everyone that you think will have your back will have your back. Tough times reveals people's true characters, and I'm going to just leave it at that. But please go ahead, if this has helped you in any capacity, please go ahead and share it on social media. Share it with a friend that you know of that's going through a tough time. Just share it. Get the word out there, because we truly want people to know that sometimes it's okay to not be okay. Like, it's okay for those tears to fall. It's okay to sometimes question God. Like, it all happens at some point in your life when something doesn't quite go your way, or you can't seem to figure out why something had to happen when it happened. But other than that, be inspired. Enjoy the rest of your week. And also, please subscribe, rate, review on whatever platform that you're listening in on today. And as always, I hope that you're truly inspired by this message.